like I wanted to be happy, but I just had this heaviness, this weight that I just couldn't figure out where it came from. And through self-development, as we get curious about ourselves, then we can actually also get curious about others.
Every life tells a story of courage, of loss, of resilience, of becoming. When we slow down long enough to hear each other's stories, we stop seeing strangers and we start seeing ourselves. I'm Jen Slumack, and this is the Soul Not Skin podcast, a place where stories create connection, invite reflection, and remind us of what it means to be human. Thank you for listening. Let's begin.
I am thrilled to have a young lady here that I met, of all places, at a Golden State Valkyries game in San Francisco. She was in, from what I've learned, is Canada. She was there with a friend, and we got to talking. And first, I realized that she volunteers inside the prison, and so I was really interested in talking to her about that. But in learning more about Jolene, she and I have a lot in common about growing up in alcoholism and having people that we love presently struggling with their own addiction. So I'm going to introduce Jolene to share a little about who you are in relationship to these different things.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. Thanks for having me. And you have such a beautiful crusade that you're up to, and that's why I want to be part of it today and just really share. Because I can say that growing up, I am from Canada, and I run my own business, and I have 3 boys, 27, 25, and 19. I have a wonderful husband, and growing up, that's not what it looked like. I grew up a alcoholic family, and a different perspective. I know that talking to Jen, a lot of people come in and they're coming through recovery, which I totally appreciate. And I just acknowledge the difficulty that would be. And, I don't myself struggle with that, but I have been, working through lots of family members that obviously go through addiction. And so, I'm going to talk about that perspective because, I know a lot of times, you might be out there and you might have a family member that is going through addiction or alcoholism. And, it does put on a lot of responsibilities, things that as kids, sometimes you're taking on more than you didn't even realize that it was actually a lot until maybe later in life when you realize you maybe didn't have a childhood. You maybe were somebody who you were responsible doing adult things long before you probably ever needed to or wanted to. And so, but I've also learned a lot of things through life. My dad really struggled with alcoholism. He started drinking at 16 years old. He didn't ever have a day that he was sober. And it really dismantled his life. I mean, the love of his life was my mom, but, she could only stick around for so long. And, that transitioned into, a lot of my family members, my brothers dealing with alcoholism. I even, I have children and, we one of them is struggling with that right now. And so, but really what I realized is that, there's a lot of, as much as we can look at the pain of it, understanding, so often in life we look at people and there's a judgment. And I think that what this has taught me in my life is to get curious. If you do have someone in your family that is dealing with addiction. Yeah, because as I got to know my dad and I got to understand, it was just medication. It was a pain. His mom died when he was 16. And I can't imagine losing a parent when you're 16 years old. And that was just numb. He was just numbing from something that was painful and became not a choice. Sometimes we look at people and we're like, why don't they just quit? So many times I prayed, just, help my dad quit. And I just realized that it had such a hold of him. And it is a disease, and at a young age, I was so fortunate to have, people in my life. I mean, it's crazy today to think about it, Jen, because I even had a grade 1 teacher who knew my situation, and she would take me home a couple times a week to stay at her house. And I know, so there, just like Jen, there's people out there doing this work, these unsung heroes. And she saved, as a little girl, that was like my sanctuary to go to her house. And today it's crazy, but you probably wouldn't even be able to do that, right? And then
Right.
she started Al-Non classes, and it would take us out of our regular class, and I would go to the Al-Non class, and I was like 7 or 8 years old, and we just had conversations, like talk through things, like it was like a circle, a place, kind of like what Jen's creating here is a place where you could be, sharing vulnerably, you could be understood, you could get curious about what other people, are dealing with and how they're handling situations, and really just community, right?
You
And
know,
so,
go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, go ahead, Jen.
You're saying so much, and I want to sort of unpack some of what you've already
Yes.
said, because I think it's really worth taking a look at. There are family members, daughters of fathers who struggle, mothers of sons or daughters who struggle. Siblings watching one of their siblings disappear from the family. you know, um, and what you said is so rarely spoken, and that is learning to have like this understanding, getting curious, right? This is not something I come from myself. I'm in recovery, long-term recovery from alcoholism. And I know that, boy, you want to stop at a certain point. And every time that you try and fail, gives you one more thing to try to medicate, right? Because you're right. It's not always people being in a tremendous amount of pain or having trauma that they need to medicate, but a lot of times they've lived a life that sort of exceeded their ability to cope. And or maybe they didn't have somebody at home that they felt they could go to, whether the person was not emotionally available, whether the person seemed overwhelmed and that, as a child, I don't want to overburden my parent who I can tell is already stressed. Whatever the case, you can find belonging with your peers who are doing things that you might not want to do, aren't wise, but there's that girl from math class. You want to drink if she's drinking, right?
That's
And
right.
so and so this is a progressive thing, and it often starts innocently enough to self-medicate or to socialize or to fit in. But it is progressive, and it is an illness, and it's neurological, and it's biological, and it's all of those things. And it gets to the point where the person literally can't stop on their own. And what a tragic place to be. And so when you say curiosity, how did you get to that as a daughter or as somebody who has loved folks struggling with addiction? Because I know you didn't just wake up there
No.
one day.
For a lot of years it was, thinking that, and this is that, sometimes people, when we're dealing with family members, we think we can help them stop. We're like, if we just get them to promise, if we just get them to make a promise to us. But then, like you said, the broken promise adds to like having to, wanting to not feel that, that you've broken your word, you're out of integrity. And so there's not that capacity to keep that promise in that moment. Right. And so I think for a lot of years as a young girl, I didn't actually know that this wasn't normal also. I just thought
Sure.
that, I think that's also part of it. There's a lot of things going on in a lot of families. My dad actually raised me since I was 2 by himself. So, I was baking bread at 10 years old, and I sort of took a role of a wife in a lot of ways. I made the dinners, I did all those things. And I became sort of I was also like a vessel for him, and what I didn't realize until later is I actually held his sadness. So as a little girl, I was actually really sad inside, but I would really overcompensate by being able to put this big smile on, and everyone thought I was okay, but inside I was heavy. And it
Know
wasn't
that.
until, so the
I know
curiosity
that.
came, yes, right? So the curiosity came later when, I really started to see that like I wanted to be happy, but I just had this heaviness, this weight that I just couldn't figure out where it came from. And through self-development, and really just getting involved in things like this, where you're getting, even curious about yourself, because as we get curious about ourselves, then we can actually also get curious about others. And so,
Yes.
yes, And I think a lot of times we go through life wanting to be understood instead of understanding.
That's right.
And so, I've really, through the years, like I said, I don't know where the wisdom really came from at what point, but it's progressive. Just the wisdoms. Because one of the things you and I were talking about, Jen, is I said, like, I'm at a point now, I am 49, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
long ways from that little girl, but I'm so grateful to God for all the gifts I had as that little girl, that he gave me the capacity to be in that, because he knew he was preparing me for something amazing. And so I often say that life happens for us, not to us, because I realized today, one of the things, even like how we connected, Jen, like, I'm just drawn to be able to make a difference with people. It's like a sixth sense. It's just something where there's like a knowing. And so I get curious about people that probably I wouldn't be curious about had I not gone through that, because it's almost like it's like a discernment. I'm able to see things that people aren't saying. I can walk into a family's home and immediately I can see who's struggling with addiction, where's the codependence
You can
relationship.
sense it. You can
Yeah, you
sense it,
can
right?
sense it. Yes. Even my husband sometimes like, how do you know that? I'm like, that's what I mean when life is happening for us, because I've been able to speak to things that people are not telling you, and that builds trust. So that's that curiosity. You can ask a question, and you already really know the answer, but you can ask the question so they feel like they're seen, even though they haven't actually, I would say, revealed maybe what's going on, but they're like almost knowing that the question is actually permission to share.
Before we get back to today's episode, I want to invite you to visit soulnotskin.com. If you've ever found yourself wondering, why do I react this way? Why do I feel stuck? Why am I successful on the outside but exhausted on the inside? You're not alone. At Soul Not Skin, I'm creating practical resources to help you understand what shaped you without shame, clinical jargon, or needing a psychology degree to make sense of it all. When you join the email list, you'll receive my free starter guide, 7 Ways Childhood Pain Shows Up in Adult Life. And if you're ready to go deeper, check out the Heal What Raised You workbook, a guided 64-page experience for adults who are outwardly successful but inwardly restless, overwhelmed, or exhausted. Understand your patterns, release your shame, and reclaim yourself. I'm also building new courses on childhood experiences, recovery, family systems, addiction, and helping families navigate the challenges of loving someone who is struggling. And I'd love your help. There's a contact form on the website where you can tell me what you're wrestling with. I read those submissions and use them to shape future podcast episodes, resources, and courses. So I'm building what people actually need, not just what I think they need. Visit soulnutskin.com, join the email list, download the free guide, and let's keep healing what raised us. Remember, you're not broken. You're human.
Yeah, I love that. What you described so well just now is, in the language of the industry, so to speak, is just the different family roles that develop around the addicted individual. And, so many of us do become, they call it parentified, which is a really fancy word for,
Yeah.
we learn to make bread at 10, right?
Yes.
Or I helped my little brother do his homework, and I cooked the hamburger helper for dinner, and
Yeah.
put my brother to bed and sang songs to him when mom couldn't be home because she was working 2 or 3 jobs, or went out to the bar to have a few drinks after 2 jobs, right? And so it does. And I don't think I've ever articulated it that way, that you said I was a vessel for my dad's sadness.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. I really relate to that. I think that a lot of children find themselves carrying that weight quietly. And I do think, too, Jolene, that part of the reason you are so capable of walking into a room and
Mm-hmm.
sort of sensing all of it is because when we were little, we had to be aware of all changes in temperature and direction and guidance and breathing and all the stuff to navigate the chaos,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That is actually something that happens with little people who have to navigate that chaos. But I love how you change the way we can look at that for us,
Yes.
not to us.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
love that.
There's probably my favorite quote, through life coaching. I mean, there's always these breakthroughs and aha moments, but one of my favorite quotes is, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And
Absolutely.
that goes for how we see people, like, if we could see past the addiction, and that, I mean, later in life, my dad, I left home at 13. I mean, it got tough. My dad was an extraordinary human being. They say that you can only love people to the capacity that you love yourself, but somehow my dad, he loved me. Like, people always say that, like, I think at times I was what he lived for. And so
Absolutely.
I always really felt very seen. And so, he did pass, in 2016, but God is so good, because I actually was able to, when I was 9, obviously through things, he was a really hard worker, my dad, but he lost his job due to the house. It got burnt down, like the shop that he worked at. So we lost our home, and we had to move a few times into a few places, but the home that we lost was actually a beautiful property, land. I mean, my dad, but he was a mechanic, a logger, he did all these things, but I know it was so sad for him. It was such another failure to add to the belt, on the notch on the belt, right? But when I moved to Ontario, because we used to live in BC, in Canada, I actually found a property, in the middle of the night. I looked online, and this property came up called Heaven on Earth. And
What?
yeah, it's crazy. As soon as I saw the property, I woke up my husband and I said, we have to buy this property, because I know that my dad will live with us. Because my dad had been living on his own. And, I called my dad, I flew him out here. He was still drinking, but, my dad was someone who was a functioning alcoholic, and so, I mean, he would show up at the Christmas concerts, always make a scene. It's like, so you learn also how to navigate those things. But, he's one of my favorite humans and one of the smartest people I ever met in my life. So when I brought him here, he's like, I would move here. And believe it or not, you know, this is how powerful love is. My love and acceptance for him. He went home, he packed his entire house, and 1 year later he moved here. And we had the most extraordinary love affair, I say, because we fell in love with each other, and we got to see, even though he still dealt with his addiction, he literally used to tell me, as because he passed away a year and a half after being with me, but he said, like, he's like, I've never loved anyone like I love you. And his capacity to love himself grew
Yeah.
because of love. So when we deal with people with addiction, like, really what they need is love. And I think that that's like a gift. I think that depth of holding space for someone's pain, once released, also became space for copious amounts of love that I'm able to extend. And it's healing. It's so healing. Not always easy to access when it's really close relationships to you, because being vulnerable sometimes, I mean, I have a son right now, and I find the hardest thing as a mother is accessing the vulnerability sometimes, for my son. Yeah, it's interesting, because it's like, it's there, and it's not always easy. Sometimes when the vulnerability shows up, I'm like, I better just leave a message, because I'm in the vulnerability. before I go
Yeah.
back into before I go back into the practical brain. Because when you I would say, when you're raised in the environments we're raised in, what predictable futures can be like, or you foresee what
How do you
predictable
mean?
futures can be like, in terms of, like, the path of not choosing to drink every single day. And like you said, like, one day you wake up and you're just doing this every day, and it's not a choice anymore. So I think when you're dealing with your kids, you're always trying to protect them. Like, don't touch the stove, it's hot, So it's like, watch what you're doing. It ends up like this, And I think sometimes, it's reminding myself to go back and be curious again. As much as I have learned that, I think we're always having to circle back to what we've learned and reapply.
It's so hard not to try to help save somebody from
Yeah,
their consequences or from their choices when you see that it's just, I mean, it's dismal.
it is.
It can be so difficult to look at somebody who is making decisions that you've learned about addiction. So you know it's not really them. I like to say that once a person crosses a certain point in their using, whether it's alcohol, drugs, they're not waking up anymore and using. They're waking up, and addiction or alcoholism is putting them on as a costume.
Yes.
And then they're moving out into the world and people see them and think it's them. But they're the puppet now, right?
That's right.
And it's tragic because you want to help. But somebody said to me one time, you can't steal his consequences from him.
Right.
Because that's the only way he's going to grow.
Yeah.
So every time you overhelp,
yes,
you're stealing from him.
Yeah.
And he's losing one more opportunity to learn how to cope with life.
It's so true. I have such
I was like, wow.
It's such a great example. My dad did that to me one time. So I remember having a breakdown financially, and it was, I had a license in financial. I lost it, and just because of the industry, and had to go redo it all. But I was without income because I was self-employed. And I called my dad, and I couldn't make my mortgage payment, and I needed $1,000. And I remember my dad saying no. And I remember I left home at 13, and I was in my mind, one part of my mind was like, you haven't done anything for me since I was 13, like,
yeah, girl.
Right?
Yeah.
And then my dad, I respect immensely for that, because what happened after that is he didn't lend me the money. And although I stayed upset with him for a few days, what happened is I got pissed off enough to do something about it. And I went out and I made a decision that I would never be in that position again. Because one of the things he said is, what have you been doing with your life that you don't have $1,000? And I love that he held me, although sometimes he had a hard time holding himself to account, he held me so big. And I appreciate that about him, because you know what? I went out from that moment and I made a 6-figure income from that moment. And he actually, like, to this day, I always tell parents, it's exactly what you said. Had he lent me the money, he would have robbed me of actually, like, digging in and just going and doing something about it. And I just like what you're saying. I love that.
Yeah, I do too. I love your story. I'm loving it. I have a few questions if we can go back a little bit. Talk about what you're willing to talk about.
Yeah,
certainly don't let me cry. But first, I'm wondering, where was mom? And then I'm interested in leaving at 13. What was that like? Where did you go? What happened there?
Okay, great. So, I mean, my mom and my dad, obviously, being that they were probably both in addiction, I had a brother, and my dad, his dad had beat him. My dad was repeating that, right? So, my mom was scared to leave my brother. And I believe my dad's words to her if she took me, he would probably kill her. And that was probably true. I mean, my dad would shoot my mom.
You said with a chuckle on your face.
Because my dad was like, he would shoot her out of the driveway. She would steal us for Christmas sometimes. I mean, God love my mom. I mean, she tried. And the challenge is when things happen so young and we get outside influence, for a long time, I made up a story. See, the stories that we tell ourselves, they imprison us to things, right? And so I had a story. That I wasn't good enough because my brother was good enough to take, and I wasn't good enough to go with her. And the life I had was hard. And part of me resented her. A big part of me resented her for a very long time. So, I never really had a full relationship with my mom, because I just felt like she abandoned me, and that went on to become, I mean, my mom and I are amazing today. Like, literally, I'm like a little girl, and like, I'm getting back the time with her. She just lived with me for 2 years, and we had so much fun. We traveled all over the world. But what it took, because there's a lot of ladies out there that have that breakdown with their mom, it took me getting curious. I kept going to self-development classes. I kept thinking it was my mom. I kept thinking I needed her to do stuff. And at one point, there was a revelation, and it was like, stop looking for the perfect mom and start becoming the perfect daughter, Jolene.
That's it, girls. That's so tricky to learn, isn't
Oh
it?
my gosh. And I was like, and it took me until I was 45 years old, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, but when that happened, I finally got curious. And the curiosity question was, what made you make that decision? Because I had never asked. I just stayed in the story that my brother was good enough to take and I wasn't, right? And many people validated that story for me. I mean, there's always people's opinions. I say if they were cost money, there wouldn't be so many. Right?
Sure, right.
So, so that was my relation with my mom, and it was hard. But my mom relationship was attached to my self-worth. So what I struggled with my entire life was lack of self-worth, and I had no self-confidence. And so that led to, like, I would say, me seeking out a lot of self-development because I kept succeeding at things in life, but I could never feel worthy of the success. I could never feel worthy of the acknowledgement or the recognition. So as much as I didn't struggle maybe with an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction, I had a low self-worth addiction. And I really I made that, like, over and over again every day. I energized that story about who I wasn't. And when I left home at 13, this point of that story is that, my dad, it was just difficult. It was difficult being a young woman. My dad was actually quite angry at that time. I was scared of some of the things that were going on. And so at that point, I just decided it was probably safer. Plus, I would imagine I was rebellious at that time too. And we lived a little bit out of town. So moving out got me closer to town. But also, again, people, there's these angels in life. Like a lady in town that I worked for at a gas station, she let me rent her basement for $600 a month, and I babysat her kids.
Wow.
She became like another parent slash sister to me, and was always there for me through my life. And then, at 13, I had 3 jobs. I worked at a diner, and the gentleman there would let me have a 1 hour break and do my homework. He was an angel. So
Uh,
if I look back, I'm so grateful because I had all these people in my life. And so I was never without love. Sometimes, it's like they say, if you have a baby, babies just know who feeds them. Sometimes we make it significant if we're not the one doing the filling their needs, but, like, really, when their needs are met, they feel love. And I would say that I felt love in a lot of places, even though sometimes it didn't always seem like it came from, like, direct family. So that's
well, and
kind of
that's
where I think now, Jen, I think that's where I always have this heart for people, like, that sometimes they just they need family. They need
that's
you to
right.
show up in a way that maybe their family doesn't have the capacity at that time, but you can fill a need, as being someone in their family. And when their family is ready to come back, they can come back and fill back that space, right?
Absolutely. And I think that that is so much the way to live, to see ourselves as surrogate family to everybody that we come across. People
Yes,
are hurting.
they
People
are.
are without love in so many different reasons, for so many different um, in so many different ways, for so many different reasons. And the curiosity and the just being there and being an angel, as you've put it.
Yeah.
It's when we think about what's my purpose, what am I doing, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? If you're, who cares where you work?
Yeah, it's true.
Love somebody,
Love somebody.
be patient with
Yes.
somebody, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It drive me nuts. People driving super slow in front of me make me absolutely crazy. It would make me nuts. I like to go where I'm going, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
at one point, I started realizing, I made up a visual, right? My mother never drove. She was afraid to drive. She never got a driver's license. She never drove. So I imagined, what if the person in front of me never drove and finally got the courage to try? And that allowed me to have like, if that were my mom, I would be so proud of her, and I would pray people would be patient, right?
It's true.
So that little story helps me so much, right? Or when I was working in the jail, and boy, some of these guys were just a handful, right?
Yeah.
And I remember this one guy in class one time, he goes, "Miss Jen, how do you put up with him?" And I said, you know what? When he's on my last nerve, when any of you are on my last nerve, I just have to remind myself that everyone here is somebody's baby.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
Everybody here is somebody's baby,
That's so true.
and it's life that distorts us,
Yes.
and it's the lack of having our needs met. I think
Yeah.
that's what you're saying is when our needs are met,
Mm-hmm.
we can develop properly. When our needs
Yeah.
aren't met, right, that's when we struggle. It's interesting, Jolene, because you said mom left
Yeah.
and you had that mom wound and the,
Yes.
missed out on the life that your brother got and took a long time to not be angry and to
That's
actually
right.
work on that relationship.
Yeah.
And then raised by a dad who you were a vessel for his sadness.
Yeah, that's right.
Girlfriend, my life was just that, but flipped.
Okay.
Honest to God, it was my dad who left.
Yeah.
Shortly after leaving, he had a new daughter. It wrecked me, right?
Yeah.
As a little girl. And mom loved us to death
Yeah.
and was self-medicating all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it was a mess for, 70% of the time.
That's right.
And just wishing and wanting and fantasizing, if things were different.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't be who we are today.
Well, and that's what I was going to say to you. In the hindsight of it all, we choose our parents. And I
Tell me more. What?
I really truly believe that, the more I go through life
Uh-huh.
and I'm getting to know, because also getting curious about yourself, like what are your special gifts, and I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, my dad was someone, as much as he made the choices he made, he did what he said he was going to do. How he did that through all of that, he had such a mental toughness, and I have mental toughness today. He had me at 10 year olds backing up a boat, it's like we're at the lake and I'm backing the trailer boat up, my dad at 12 o'clock at night would want to go for a motorcycle ride and drive into a river and float away in the night, and I'd have to get someone to rescue him. It's like,
oh my God.
he would say, let's get in the truck and let's drive on the ice, and the truck would fall through the ice. So one of the things I don't
Okay,
have.
so hold on a second. Now you're telling these stories like it's funny, like you're, bopping a beach ball around at the local. These are traumatic things happening.
They're so traumatic, but what they did is they actually, I don't have fear. I'm not afraid of anything. It's like fear is not part of my existence. Like if it's scary, I'll be like, oh, well, it'll work out, because every scary thing we went through somehow worked out.
I love that. I want to know how the falling through the ice in the truck worked out. Can you just tell us that real quick?
I know. Oh my gosh.
We'll go on this tangent.
I was about 8 years old.
Okay.
And my dad had this fantastic, we lived by a lake, so you could drive your truck on the lake. For the most part that worked, unless you were close to the edge.
Sure.
So after doing lots of burnouts, the ice was not strong in one area. So my dad's truck ended up going through, which I learned.
With
I
you
never
guys
understood.
in it?
We were in it. Oh yeah, but here's the key. Having windows that you can, electric windows, I used to have nightmares about it, because he'd always say to me, you always have to have windows you can roll down, because if you have old trucks, you can roll the windows down. If you have remote control, you can't roll the windows down. So we did get out of the truck, and we did get warm, and we did actually get the truck pulled out, the next couple days. But those kinds of things, I tell people, they'd be like, what? It's like, yeah, that would be my dad. He was like that. He was like that. That Bernstein bear where he's like, watch this, son, and he'd go do something crazy and then he'd hurt himself. That was pretty much my dad.
The Bernstein bears were my favorite.
I'll close up on that though, about choosing your parents, because I don't have fear, which it honestly gives me so much freedom today. So it's almost like I lived a life of working out my fear early. So I have a fearless adult life, which I meet a lot of people who have fear. And it does stop them from things that they could really enjoy because they fear the unknown, where I actually don't fear the unknown. I know it's all going to work out. I have this faith, right? And then also my dad was somebody who it's like he was tough, I mean, he would come in a room and he'd find the one thing you didn't do. And as a child growing up, you could call that constructive feedback. And I think like I probably seeked acknowledgement and recognition for a long time, thinking that's what I needed because I didn't get it from him. And later in life, I realized I'm proud of myself and I can acknowledge myself. And my attention to detail is actually amazing. So it's a super skill. So a lot of these things that felt like I wish it was easier. They always say, like, get better, don't be bitter. And I really have that perspective now that had anyone else raised me, I wouldn't have had those like special skills. And I think also the last one is when you're dealing with people that do have addiction, like you said, you wake up, you assess the situation. You're very good at figuring out how to be what are we dealing with, right? But you also, because you do realize at some point that it is a sickness, that you have a forgiving spirit. And I have a really forgiving spirit. It's kind of like I can overcome things. I don't stay stuck on, okay, so you acted that way. Okay, what was your story? What were you dealing with? Like, that's the curiosity part. It's like now when people are having a temper tantrum, for example, because adults do that, we get mad at people's behavior versus get curious. Like, if we had a kid in front of us and they were having a temper tantrum, we would hug them and we would say, what's going on? What are you afraid of? And adults have temper tantrums and we react to the way that they're being versus get curious and go over and say, like, okay, what's going on right now? What's coming up for you? And if the world operated out of curiosity, and we realize that people, when they're afraid, they fight, they flight, or they facade. Those are the three responses to fear. The entire world is in a fear mode most of the time. Fear of money, fear of acceptance, fear of not being loved, fear of all the things. And here we are, and we're reacting to basically how they're behaving versus being curious.
Knowing that I'm afraid of any of these things.
Yes. Fear of
You
what
know?
people think. Yes.
Well,
No
and I
fear.
love what you said, because the truth is, I talk about this with people quite a bit, about how we as a society, or just as a human race, we tend to look at behavior as the origin.
Yes.
Like that's the starting point of the problem, the
Yes.
behavior.
Yes.
And no, right? No, that's easy. It's easy to see somebody throw a temper tantrum and say they behaved poorly, get them out of here. You're fired, you're incarcerated, you're arrested, go to your room. Like, all of that is easy. But what happened? What's happening? How are you? What's going on? As an adult, there's absolutely unresolved stuff.
That's right.
If I have to bark or scream, or if I'm triggered to react really strongly when small things happen,
Yeah.
then there's stuff that's unresolved.
That's right.
And the curiosity, if we were able to adopt that, would allow us to have more compassion for folks. This is the work that I do in the prisons and in the jails, so that I want to get back to doing.
Yes.
So many people who are incarcerated probably need to be incarcerated. But there are an awful lot of people who had incredible sentences, who made mistakes, who have taken accountability. And usually when somebody intervenes to say, what happened to you? How did that impact the choices that you made? What did you do that got you here? Can you make amends in any way to the situation?
That's right.
And are you willing to be a peacemaker going? It's unreal.
Yeah,
what we can do if we love somebody, right? Love not meaning cuddle, but love meaning make space for people.
Yeah.
Make space, make grace, right? Give grace.
So, it's interesting what you said, because like a lot of times we look at people who are incarcerated and, there's a judgment. I mean, obviously doing prison ministry and being trained for that, there's a big judgment. Like even people, oh, you go into a prison or you talk to prisoners and the truth is so many, I mean, it's kind of like when you sin, okay? Human beings will say, that's a terrible sin. Well, that's not that bad, And it's like,
Yeah.
who made you the judge? Okay. So,
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, when we look at people that are incarcerated, I would just say they got caught. And there's a lot of people that are out there and they could be incarcerated based on things that they've done or they're
Yep.
doing. They didn't get caught. And, for so many people that do get caught, this is an opportunity for change because as long as we get away with things, sometimes we just keep doing them, right?
Yeah.
So, I think it's like for me, I got caught in no fulfillment in my life. So it was like being in prison of my own thoughts and my own lack of self-worth. So in its own right, that was a prison because I wasn't free. And so just like people that are incarcerated, I believe the same thing. It's like a judgment of who they are. And that's not their identity. That's just something they did. And there was consequences for what they did. And they get to redeem themselves. And I think like that's that forgiving spirit that if the world adopted that, just like everybody else, they're someone's baby, like you said. They're someone's baby, they're someone's parent.
Yep.
And so, some things, yes, maybe there's a sickness and it's a, like you said, there's certain things to be incarcerated for, but there are a lot of people who can redeem themselves, and we just need to be able to actually see them for who they can become versus who they've been.
Well, we like to put, like pins in people.
Yeah. Yeah.
At their worst moment.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we like to say, this is who you are.
Yeah.
And boy, if there's no better example than somebody who is a felon, right?
That's
who comes
right.
out having served time for a felony charge. And I'm not going to take us on the tangent of, discrepancies in arrests and
Yeah.
prison time and all these things. But the reality is that so many people have the ability and the willingness and the desire to figure out what's going on with me.
That's right.
What is going on with me? More times than not, in my experience, what I've learned with the people that I've got, had the opportunity to talk with and to work with inside state prison or county jails, it's not so much that they're looking for a second chance. They're looking for a chance.
A chance, yeah.
Because a lot of times they didn't get any tools.
That's right.
They didn't get their needs met as a little person. So they kept growing up and the world's expectations of the larger size of them, kind of went, and they couldn't live up to it.
That's right.
It's, I don't know. It's interesting.
I know. There's much work to do.
Yeah. The system story. I'm taking notes here.
Yeah, no worries.
I love what you said, the story that we tell ourselves imprisons us, and you just talked about it again, prison in your thoughts. Mm-hmm. There's this wonderful analogy and then this wonderful film. The film I want you to make a note of and go see, and I also encourage the listeners to. It's called The Prison Within. Mm-hmm. And a man that I know and some other folks put together this film from San Quentin State Prison, now called State Rehabilitation Center, just recently changed. And it's about how the mindset inside, when you're living inside, can either be your true prison or your true freedom. Yes. And being able to free yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, opens you up to doing things that sometimes can lead to release.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so it's a beautiful film. Definitely check it out. The other thing I was going to say about that is, the story about an elephant. If you tie an elephant to a stake, a baby elephant to a stake, this story.
Yeah.
And you let them be on that, tied to that stake for 10 years, and then you remove the rope and they just stay.
Yeah.
Because they don't know that they can go, right? And there's so many people in our world who don't know that they can go
That's
or
right.
do or succeed, right?
Yeah. Well, that happens in addiction. I mean, that's where addiction perpetuates itself. We see something and it becomes normal, and then
Yeah,
we repeat, right? That's
yeah,
why programs like what you're talking about, it's like spaces and creating community where people can have dialogue and conversation and start breaking those cycles and those patterns that are out there, right?
so
I
how
mean,
do we do it, Jolene? How do we get the
no,
world to be curious?
it at the end of the day, it's I do believe that a lot of things in life are choices. Like we don't make see the thing is, there's something I always say to people, we don't fix a car until it breaks down. You can drive around a car and a car is like, making noises, it's on its last legs, but we'll drive that sucker till it breaks down. But once it breaks down, we have no other choice but to
That's right.
fix it. Otherwise, we don't have a vehicle. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's the human being. A lot of times it
Yeah.
does take the total breakdown. It's like what you said, like we can't rob people of that. And the hardest part is loving people and knowing that it has to sometimes get to that point. Like I work with people with money, and as much as people desire to have abundance and money, it sometimes take them getting to the point where they have no money to finally be willing to make the necessary changes to hold the money differently,
Sure. Sure.
right? Like you can win the
And to think
lottery,
about it differently.
and to
It's
think
all
of it,
about the thought
it's
process.
all a mindset, because you can give someone $1 million, and if they don't have a money mindset, within a couple of years they'll have no money, right? And so I mean, this is the things that we need to work on. We need to work on, what do we really want? We focus a lot on our past, and I always say the rearview mirror is really small. Focus on looking forward. What do you really want? Because whatever we're focused on is growing. And so if you want, there was three, I did a workshop and it said, what are three things, like identify like ways of being? Like, what does your life represent? Like you said it earlier, like people look for what's their purpose. And a couple of the things I talked about is I wanted freedom. So it's like, okay, well, what does freedom mean? Freedom of like caring what people think, freedom to just be self-expressed, just freedom to say whatever I want to say, right? So that's freedom. I want freedom. What else do I want? I want freedom financially. Okay. And then it was like, I want love. Like, love is really, I mean, without love, I mean, it's so lonely, like if the whole world just focused on loving, like, how can I love right now? What could I do right now to love? If we just focused on that, like go do 100 random acts of kindness. If you're depressed, just go think of 100 things you can, every day your focus is, what can I do for somebody else?
That's
And
it, girl.
if you
Yeah.
do that, in 100 days from now, you'll love yourself because you'll get a reflection back of who you're being in
That's
the
right.
world, right?
That's
And
right.
then so love was my next one. And the last one was connection, freedom, love, and connection. And that's what I want for my future. Because if you ask people what they want in their life, you'll say, why do you want that? Why do you want the wealth? Why do you want those things? What's the way you're going to feel? And I said freedom, love, and connection. And the thing about that is, I can choose freedom, love, and connection even when I don't have money, even when I maybe don't have
Yeah.
all the things sorted out. I can choose, like a circle. I can be in pain. I can be in all those other things if I keep focusing on that. But if I just kind of step out of that circle and I step into this other circle, and it's freedom, love, and connection, I can be that in this exact moment. It's kind of like a road trip. Like, if I get in a car for 10 hours, the road trip is painful. I don't really want to drive for 10 hours, but what keeps me going is wherever I'm headed to. Obviously, I felt like a 10-hour drive was worth getting there. So I'm
Yeah.
constantly thinking about, when I get there, I'm going to see these people. When I get there, I'm going to do this. See, we have to do that in our life. Where do we want to get to? And then right now, I can think about that. It's like if I book a vacation right
Yeah.
now, I'm so excited about the vacation because I know it's the future I'm living into. But I can be on the vacation on the last day and I know I'm coming back to my regular life, and people can
Wah,
be
wah, wah,
right.
wah.
Exactly. Because it's the future they're living into. So, leaving this podcast is, it's like, what do you really want in your life? And think about that most of the time, because you will
I
get
love that.
yeah, you'll get what you focus on. They say your personality is your personal reality. So whatever you're
Ooh.
thinking about. Yeah, that's a really good one, because some people say I'm just like this. Well,
Oh,
you're like that because of the thoughts that you're thinking, because your
that's right.
thoughts is where you take your actions from,
That's
right?
right.
And your actions are giving you the results of your life. So if you change your thoughts, which really, to change your thoughts, you got to change your language. So knowing that anything you speak out of your mouth is like you're actually putting that out there as
You're
something that
putting it out there and it's
you're
going to
attracting.
manifest.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's going to manifest.
Yeah.
You know, I so appreciate everything that we've talked about today, Jolene. And I think one of the reasons that I love doing what I'm doing right now with the storytelling and the podcast and using my book to create curriculum for young people growing up without the basic needs met and needing to find ways to increase resilience and, foster growth and development in community with connection. All of these different things that I'm doing, I love it because it's about, like you just said, man, it's about connection, empowering freedom from self, old ideas, and, the mechanics that sort of break our path because of where we've been and don't know the language of what it is and how to fix it. And what did you say? Freedom, love, and connection. Oh, and love. I mean, we can learn to love ourselves. I always got clarity about myself through stories that I would read.
Yes.
I read stories, or I watched a film, or I heard a song, or whatever. It's always been some sort of creative narrative that has given me language for something that I was experiencing. And that's what I want to do with this podcast. And that's what you're helping me do today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because it's connection and it's love and it's freedom. One of my favorite things that my pastor actually says is that we want to go into the world always saying, what does love require?
Yes.
Today, what does love require?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And love is an action,
Yeah, it's a verb.
It's in action. So, what are you doing to get out and moving and do something, opening a door, complimenting, because when we're outside, I find sometimes we just spend too much time inside and we can't impact people the same way. Or like what you're doing. This is still getting outside, because this is being out in the world. We met at a basketball game, and here we are building a friendship. And and I would say a couple tools that I would say to leave you with, because I think sometimes it's kind of like, okay, I got all this. And one thing I think a lot of people in the world feel right now is overwhelm. And there's a couple things I say when you feel overwhelmed. Overwhelm is just feedback. And feedback is just saying to you that you're not committing to something. So if I feel overwhelmed with finances, I probably haven't sat down and looked at my money and my budget, and it's just requiring me to just take a minute and sit down. If I'm overwhelmed with time, like I think people have a big, there's no time, I have no time. If you keep saying you have no time, all that time you say you have no time, you had time.
Right.
It
Right.
took all
You're
the
wasting
time.
it.
Yeah, so just get a calendar out and just actually put on your calendar everything you're doing from the time you get up in the morning, and do 15-minute increments on your alarm clock. What did I do? What did I do? What did I do? And you'd be surprised. You're going to find a whole bunch of time. So any area, if you're overwhelmed in your relationships, well, then you likely have some people on your heart, and there's work to do. Just one by one, write a letter, make the connection. What's one thing you can do? Right? Take action. Take action. And then when you do feel paralyzed by fear, which I think a lot of us do at times, fear is just the absence of courage. So just what's one thing you can do that scares you? If you're...
It's also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so you look for the next action. Whenever you feel fearful, there's an action to take that to take that you're not taking. Take that action.
Yeah, and we also, the fears are, I love this, it says false evidence appearing real, right? So we look at something and we start imagining, it's that thinking thing again, right? What am I thinking about what is coming? Because I'm thinking into problems. I'm thinking into failure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So absolutely. Love is a verb. Overwhelm is trying to tell you that you have action to take. I love that.
Yeah. It's commitment. It means you're missing commitment in something. So you just the question to ask yourself is, what am I not committing to in that area? And then just go make the commitment, and just one day at a time. That's it.
Everybody that's out there listening right now, I'm watching Jolene, and she just really is as comfortable and quick with these thoughts. I'm looking at her, and she's got a big smile on her face, and she's like, just go commit, go and take the action, and it's pretty fantastic. I mean, your voice, your energy, just all of it. You're such a joy to talk to. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. I got to ask, and I'm sure that this is not necessary or welcome, but do people sing the song to you?
Yes. They do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the irony of that story is,
What?
when I read, because I listened to the words, imagine my mom left it too when I was 2. So
Sure.
my whole life, people would sing this song and I would listen to the words and it's like, please don't take my man away. And I was just like,
Yeah.
what was going on? But really, it was just that it was a unique, and funny enough, I didn't like my name for a lot of years. I wanted, my middle name is Catherine, and I thought I wanted to be called Catherine. And now, you know what? It's such a unique name, and I do feel that God gave me special things, and I appreciate the name because people remember it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Being in Canada, I think it's 10 o'clock there when we started, right?
Yeah.
You're 3 hours ahead of me, and it's very deep in the evening for you. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course.
If today's conversation reminded you of someone, share it with them. If it reminded you of yourself, don't let the story end here. Take a few minutes to write about what stayed with you. You see, the stories that we tell ourselves shape our lives, but the stories that we're willing to examine can change them. If you'd like more resources or to contact me, visit soulnotskin.com. Subscribe to my newsletter and you'll receive the free self-examination starter guide as a thank you for being here. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep discovering yourself through the stories that we share. Bye-bye.